Hi everybody, it's Andrea Ankrum with Indivisible, Northern Kentucky District 4, here with another episode of our Coffee Klatch Conversations with Candidates. This is where we bring your candidate to you, and using a question and answer forum, you get to hear their views on issues that are affecting Kentuckians today. If you're watching us live on our Facebook page or through our YouTube channel, please, we encourage you to submit questions for your candidate tonight, and we will have him answer them. If you watch this later, you can still ask questions and we'll try to get them answered as well. So our guest tonight is Josh Blair. He's running for the Kentucky State Rep seat in District 63. Welcome, Josh.
Thank
it's
you.
Nice to have you here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about yourself and why you're running for this office.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so my name's Josh Blair. I'm running for the State House in Kentucky District 63, which is Kenton and parts of Kenton, parts of Boone County. I was born and raised in Northern Kentucky. Grew up in Fort Mitchell, Lakeside Park. I live in Erlanger now. I am an adjunct professor at NKU. I teach communication, mostly public speaking and mass media classes. And I have 3 kids who are in the Kenton County School District. My son is in 8th grade at Turkey Foot, and I have twin girls who are in 4th grade at Kaywood. And I'm running because, we need some people who are going to bring some common sense and decency back to Frankfort. Somebody who supports education, supports our communities, and will listen to our constituents. We've seen sort of a lack of transparency with some of these things. I'm sure we're going to talk about the pension bill, the tax increases, things like that, and just kind of make sure that we maintain the integrity of our schools, of our communities, of our state, our region, and kind of get Kentucky back on the right track.
Okay, great. So we're going to jump right into our questions here, and our first question is about the public employee pensions, right? And so we all know about the Senate Bill 1 that was didn't go through, but then they created or tacked on this issue onto Senate Bill 151, which was passed and later determined to be unconstitutional. What is your understanding of the public employees pension issue, including current funding issues?
Okay. Well, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on, and right now that Senate Bill 151 sort of tied up in the courts, and now it's going to the state Supreme Court because the governor appealed that. But I think there's a lot going on there, and I think the first thing that, despite whether you're for it or against it, the way they did that was not correct, and that's why it's in the court, where they pushed it through in 6 hours on the last day of session. I went to the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce legislative update back in the fall. I think it might have been November. And there were some state reps and state senators for Northern Kentucky up there. And, on stage they said, we're going to tackle this pension bill, and then we're going to do the budget. We plan to have it done in a few weeks. Well, 4 months went by, and they did it the last day. And so, that's it's not the way to do things. Obviously, that is, unconstitutional, and that's why it's in the courts right now. And when somebody does something like that, there's a reason for it. You don't just kind of cram it through last day.
Right.
No actuary analysis and things like that. So despite if somebody says, hey, I think this pension bill is great or this pension bill is horrible, it's hard not to agree that, okay, well, the way it happened was not right. But in terms of the bill itself, with that lack of actuary analysis, and even some of the other people who've sort of analyzed it, that it's going to cost the state more money, and it's going to give the state employees worse benefits. I know in Ohio, the teachers public employees have options for which retirement plan they want, and one of them is this cash hybrid plan, which is what this bill would do. Only 5% of teachers choose that plan, and only 5% of teachers choose it because it's not a good plan. The pension system now, if we didn't change it off, we just kind of let it do its thing, it would, there would be a lot of funding in there. But this cash hybrid plan is not the answer. And I've heard from a lot of current retired educators, professors at universities, parents of students who are in the education field, and the consensus is, don't teach in Kentucky, which, negatively impacts our schools.
Right.
And here in Northern Kentucky, and especially in my district, we have some of the best schools in the state.
Right.
I mean, with Beechwood, which is where I went, the Kent County School District's one of the top 10. Boone County's in the top 10. And so if we're losing quality educators to other states, or I was even talking to a teacher the other day, and she said that, some teachers are just going to a different profession altogether.
Right.
They're selling real estate, they're doing this, they're doing that, and these are, good teachers, because they're afraid of what might happen.
Right. So what are your ideas for how they should be funded or the future of the pension plan?
If we adequately funded, it'll be fine. That was the issue.
The way that it's currently designed.
Yeah, and that's it. Everybody who knows, about, all the sort of experts about that say that if you just fund it, it'll be fine. I with this tax reform, that they also kind of did the same thing the last day of session.
Right.
And they're saying, oh, well, we need to do that to help with the pensions or whatever. Kind of the same thing. We don't do tax reform in 6 hours from the last day of session. We definitely do need, some tax reform in the state, absolutely. But it needs to be done right. And, there needs to be an actuarial analysis, and we need to determine, okay, well, how much, funding is this going to bring in, and is it fair? These taxes on things such as auto repair, labor, and veterinarian services
I
for
just
small.
paid some of that.
Veterinarian services for small animals. I have a friend of mine from high school who owns a gym in Fort Mitchell and has to charge his, his customer sales tax. So things like that hurt everyday people like me and you, and it's just taking more money out of our pockets. So, to look at tax reform and see, okay, is this really helping or is it actually hurting people? Is it costing us? Is it hurting the middle class or working class and lower income families? Right.
So there was I don't know if it was an actual bill, but somebody had brought up or suggested that making casino gambling or any type of gambling legal in Kentucky could bring in some of these funds. How would you feel about that?
I'm not as rah about the gaming, the casino gaming. I don't really have a problem with it. It's just, I think, if there were a bill that came out for that, I would support it because, we are losing revenue to other states, to Indiana, to Ohio, especially up here. We have, there's 4, within a 20-minute drive or whatever, depending on where you live. So, we are losing that revenue to other states. We're the horse racing capital of the world, so it's not like gambling's a thing that we don't do here. But the reason why I'm not so, touting that as like this sort of beacon of hope is that, from what I've heard from people in the know, that it's not really going to generate as much as we need. I think it's a piece of that puzzle with, tax reform and with some other things. But some of the things that I was seeing is that some people were acting like this was like the solution.
The answer,
and it's like, well, no, like that's part of it. But, I'm not opposed to it. I don't personally gamble. I might go to the casino once every 2 years or something like that. But again, if we're losing people to literally Cincinnati and Rising Sun and places like that, that's a lot of lost revenue.
That we want to try to keep here.
And the way Ohio did it is where they just did it in the major cities. So if we had one in Northern Kentucky, one in Lexington, one in Louisville, somewhere in Eastern Kentucky, maybe kind of strategic locations to say, okay, we have 4 or 5. And Ohio seems to be doing pretty well with that.
Okay. The General Assembly passed a $22 billion education budget, which rejected some of Governor Bevin's proposed cuts. However, there were many programs that were affected, such as funding for textbooks and money for professional development. Additionally, school districts will only get a $19 increase per student, and that went from $3,981 to $4,000. What are your ideas to support funding of our public education system in Kentucky?
That's a great question because, one thing that's really frustrating, I know for me and for other educators and parents, is, we hear this spin about how there's this record level of, the way they word it's very specific. It's like record dollar amount per student or something like that, which isn't entirely inaccurate, except if you adjust for inflation, which you have to do.
Right.
And when you adjust for inflation, it's pre-2008 levels. So really, they're getting less money per student than they did 10 years ago.
Right.
And, we're not dumb. We can do basic math. We know how inflation works. When the superintendents and the principals are the ones saying, hey, look, this isn't more, they're the ones that do the budget.
Right.
They know. So they're getting less money. And even, if we set that aside, okay, so let's say, okay, this is a historic dollar amount per student. The fact that you're cutting funding for the textbooks, for the professional development, I mean, not cutting, I mean eliminating. There's
Right.
$0 for textbooks, $0 for professional
Doesn't even
development.
make sense.
And they cut some funds for pre-K, for preschool, early childhood. They didn't eliminate it, but they did that. So, even if you're saying, okay, well, we're giving you more money here, but you're taking away all of this money, so
Right.
and you're giving them less money. Like it's not. It's again, it's basic math. Like, and we're not dumb. We can figure that out, right? If I save $5 on my phone bill a month, but my electric bill goes up $20, I didn't save money on my bills.
Right.
So, I've seen at I know, for instance, at River Ridge, or excuse me, not River Ridge, at Hinsdale and Edgewood. Where I've many friends whose children go there. There's been positions eliminated. People who are very, very talented. They've lost some positions there because of funding issues. Again, the textbooks, the professional development, and if you look at, when you look at the private sector, I mean, there's always money for tools or materials that you need. There's always professional development, things like that.
Right.
But we're not providing to our teachers who are already. Schools are already underfunded. They're already underpaid. So we definitely need some adequate funding for that.
What are your thoughts on charter schools and tax credits for private school tuition? Because that will take money away from public schools as well.
I'm against both. I mean, charter schools, just you can look at Ohio, Michigan, other states. It's just bad news across the board. It cost the state a lot of money. They closed down. I think it was ECOT or one of them that owes Ohio like millions of dollars. They're just not. We don't need those. Again, it's just bad news, and it is going to siphon money away from the public schools. With the private school tax credits, I've talked to people, who we agree on a lot of things, but then there's that's the one thing we disagree on, and I understand where they're coming from, but it's like that's not how tax dollars work. You don't get to choose where your money goes, right? If we did, who would fund the PVA, right? Who would check that box? It's just that we pay our taxes, and then our elected officials waste it all somewhere. They screw it all up. So that's how it works. But one thing I was talking to somebody the other day, and he used to work in parochial schools, now he's in public schools, and so he has insight kind of for both. And the one thing that he said that he kind of tells his friends in the parochial schools is, if the public schools are fully funded, they might be on board with the scholarship tax credit. But I said, as long as they're underfunded, there's no way, right? If they don't have enough money, and you're wanting to take money away from them, they'll never support that. And I didn't think, if you're talking about kind of compromise or looking at issues, again, I personally don't support that, but, I know in my district especially, the parochial schools, there's many of them. My brother and sister went to parochial schools. I have friends whose children go there, and so I think that's an issue where I would agree with him that our public schools are underfunded.
Right.
So to take more money away from them is not the right answer.
The answer. Right. Okay. Let's talk about marijuana.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on medical marijuana, bringing businesses and jobs into the state and possibly using the revenues for education, and then also legal recreational marijuana? And along with all of that is the hemp industry. So what are your thoughts on all three of those?
I think Kentucky's behind on that. We're seeing other states. I mean, Ohio here soon is going to start having medicinal marijuana. You talk to any expert, you talk to any, there's lots of parents who are advocates with, their kids having seizures and things like that, how that would help them. And it just seems bizarre that we're not moving forward with that for that reason. I mean, that to me, that's the main reason, is to help people who that medicinal cannabis can help them with health problems. But also, like you said, it can also generate revenue too. We have a large revenue issue in Kentucky. We give away more tax breaks than we collect in tax revenue. Right. So if we're looking for new sources of funding, here's a perfect example, right? And so I think that would, again, it's one of those pieces of that puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to solve everything, but it
Right.
certainly would. But I think, if we had sort of a hemp industry in, say, eastern Kentucky, where there's a lot of out-of-work coal miners,
Mm-hmm.
that could also help revitalize that region.
Mm-hmm.
My great-grandfather was a coal miner in Pennsylvania, in a small town. And I went back recently, it was a couple of years ago, with my grandmother to visit, and it's depressing,
Yeah.
and there's people who are still there decades later, just never recovered economically.
Right.
And, that's kind of true for a lot of Appalachia.
Right.
So if we're looking at putting these people back to work, I know people like Adam Edlin are trying to get like a solar sort of industry up and running there, which I think is great. But if we also had a hemp industry, it's like, let's, train these people at vocational schools, technical schools, how to work in these new industries, and put them back to work, help that economy, and then we're going to help people as well who are who are suffering, who can use this.
Right. Do you think that it should go to a vote of the constituents, or is that something that you think that Frankfurt, the representatives, could do?
Yeah, I think the representatives could do. I mean, I think that's an issue where, we're seeing it at other states. We're seeing it like across the river in Ohio. All the research is there that it's beneficial. So I think that's something where it's just, we need to legalize medicinal cannabis.
What if we don't get legalized medical marijuana right away, but being allowed to grow it? And sell it to other states. I mean, that's a potential as well. Even if we can't move that other piece forward right away, would you support that?
My concern with that is that then we're going to get stuck. If we don't legalize medicinal marijuana, but we kind of legalize this these other things that are kind of watered down, I'm worried that we as a state are going to be stuck there, and then legalizing medicinal marijuana will be decades away. Okay. So I don't want to say it's an all or nothing kind of situation, but my concern would be like, look, this is what we need to do. Why don't we just do it?
Yeah.
Why are we kind of
sometimes baby steps? You could help, but if some people aren't sure, this isn't right for us, so it might be a way of just kind of introducing, like, hey, it is actually good for our state economy, and now we can move forward. So, okay. So moving on to the opioid crisis. There's multiple factors that are involved. Big pharma, physicians overprescribing, the need for alternative pain medications. What are your thoughts and ideas for combating this epidemic here in northern Kentucky?
No, that's a great question. Because that's actually, a big concern of mine. And that's actually part of the reason why, kind of the reason why I started thinking about running for office, because a friend of mine from middle school had died of an overdose, and she had a young son, came from a good family, grew up in Lakeside Park, went to Catholic school, all this kind of stuff. But obviously, drugs don't discriminate based upon anything. And so, when I was at her, the layout, obviously I was sad, but then, later that day I was kind of getting mad because I hear all these people from City Hall up to Washington, and all in between, talking about how this is such a huge problem and we need to do something about it, and we need to, double down our efforts and this and this and this. But then every year it's just been getting worse. We had this historic heroin legislation in 2015. What's happened since 2015? Overdose go up. Fentanyl and carfentanil deaths go up. HIV spreading. Hepatitis is spread. All the bad things you can imagine just keeps getting worse. So, we need to look at what we're doing is not working. And I know there's a program that's been featured kind of national media at the Kenton County Detention Center, which I think is great. I think we need to look at more rehabilitation programs because what hasn't been working and what research shows that has not been working is just throwing people in jail because they get out and they start doing drugs again. I was reading this really interesting kind of article that had a lot of studies about what scientifically proven strategies can we take to combat the heroin crisis. And in it said the definition of addiction is doing something without regard for consequences, right? So whether you're addicted to heroin or whether you're addicted to gambling or alcohol or shopping, whatever you're addicted to, people lose their house, they lose their families, they lose their marriage. So if somebody's addicted to heroin or pain pills or whatever, you say, well, I'm gonna throw you in jail. But they don't care. Some of these people are robbing their families, they're committing crime. disregarding the consequences. They're addicted.
Right.
So, you know, we need to look at it as the disease that it is, get these folks help, get them into treatment. And I think, you know, there's a short-term and long-term things we need to do. So the short-term would be that, you know, getting these people in treatment, and kind of getting them the help they need. And that's, you know, there's a lot of factors involved. I know there's the NKY, HIRT, it's HIRT, you know, Northern Kentucky Health Department,
Right.
you know, obviously the criminal justice system. I mean, there's so many players involved. It's a very multifaceted program. So that's kind of the short-term solution to fix that. But, you know, I was talking to Dr. Lynn Sadler, who's the head of the health department, and she said that her concern is that, you know, let's say we just magically solve this heroin problem this year. The concern is that in 3 or 4 years, maybe it's meth, maybe it's cocaine, maybe, you know, so...
It's always something. It
Yeah,
used to be crack cocaine.
Yeah, and I remember when I was in college, it was meth. There was a lot of meth down kind of, you know, a little bit further south of us. So it's not that drug, it's addiction, right? And so we need to look at the long-term solutions. You know, what can we do long-term to prevent, you know, this epidemic of whatever drug it might be? And we see, you know, education, you know, having a good job, you know, things like that prevent people from doing drugs. And I kind of, a lot of the issues go back to education, but really is a silver bullet for so many issues. You know, if you're well educated, you're less likely to do drugs, you're less likely to turn to crime, you're more likely to get a good job. If you have a good job, you're less likely to do drugs, you know, turn to crime, all that kind of stuff. So, so again, there's a short term, which, you know, I kind of mentioned, also long term, which is things like investing in education, investing in, you know, making sure people have, you know, there's good jobs for them when they finish high school or college that, you know, are well paying, people have health care, you know, things like that. And that's going to, you know, because again, we can magically solve the heroin crisis. In 4 or 5 years, it could be another crisis.
Right. So going back to some of the factors that are involved, big pharma, the pharmaceutical companies that are pushing these drugs, and then the physicians who have been overprescribing. Do you have any thoughts on what we could do as a state to kind of rein that in? Because there's just areas in the state where you look and they're, you know, so many pills have gone to these small towns, and it's just, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think we have seen a little bit of that, both at the federal and state level. I know the Attorney General has been going after some of the big pharma companies. I know that there was a bill that was trying to, and I don't remember the exact details about big pharma. It didn't pass, and I know a lot of people, I'm friends with a lot of people who are involved with like NKY Hates Heroin and some of those other groups that were really upset about that. And a lot of it's politics because, you know, we have a Democratic Attorney General and a Republican governor, and it's, you know, it's like this is a nonpartisan issue. People are dying every day. You know, children are losing their parents every day. You know, there are research-based, you know, proven solutions and strategies to combat this. So to sit there and bicker, you know, make it a partisan issue is just, I mean, it's inhumane. And yeah, you know, I do think. Yeah, I mean, Big Pharma has, you know, they have done kind of what you said, you know, pushed that a lot. And I'll give you an example. So I had I met a guy he was in college, and he had recently gotten out of prison. And he said that when he was in high school, he played football, and one day he got hurt playing a game. And so he was prescribed painkillers, opioids. And, you know, here's a kid, he's a teenager, he's just following doctor's orders, and, you know, he's taking them just like the doctor, you know, keeps refilling it. Well, one time the doctor stopped, he didn't refill it. Well, lo and behold, this kid, again, a teenager, you know, he's a child, was addicted. And so what he'd do is he started buying pills on the street. I mean, he never used a needle, never robbed anybody, never, you know, had a gun or, you know, anything like that, never was violent. Was just buying prescription pain pills off people, and he got caught, and he spent some time in jail. And it made me think, you know, when he was on that football field, because I mean, obviously high school football is huge around here. You know, I think all those people are cheering for him, and, you know, like whatever, you know, wearing the clothes and the flags and all that kind of stuff. But then, you know, who's rooting for him now? You know, or who was rooting for him when he was addicted to pain pill, literally following doctor's orders? And I think that's a big misconception. Everybody thinks that, oh, well, they're, you know, these junkies and they're just injecting and they're shooting up or whatever. You know, a lot of it is pain pills. And, you know, yeah, sometimes people do, you know, move to, you know, intravenous drugs because, you know, it can be cheaper or more accessible. But, It's like I said, here's a perfect example of somebody who was just doing what he was told by a doctor, trusted adult. So yeah, I think we do need to look at that and scale that back and look at alternative means for other than prescribing strong opioids.
Absolutely. Okay. So higher education costs are skyrocketing. The average college student ends up tens of thousands of dollars in debt upon graduating from college. And you working for NKU, probably pretty familiar with this. Do you have any solutions for this crisis? How can the Kentucky government support our students in their pursuit of higher education?
Yeah, no, and it really is a problem. So the semester starts tomorrow for I guess all the schools, but for NKU. So when I went to NKU, I was there from 2001 to 2005. When I started in 2001, the fall of 2001, a full-time semester was $1,200. This semester, it starts tomorrow, a full-time semester at NKU, no room, no board, no books, is going to be over $4,800.
That's like UK.
Yeah, and I've talked to people who have kids at UK, Eastern, Western, U of L, and that's pretty about the same. I mean, so a full year of just tuition is about $10,000.
Right.
So these kids are going to graduate with $40,000 in debt. And how people say, oh well, kids get scholarships and grants. I said, in my district especially, with Edgewood, Fort Mitchell, Villa Hills, Crescent Springs, they don't because their parents make too much.
Right.
So literally, either if they can afford it, their parents are paying out of pocket, or they are tacking this debt onto their students, by extension them, because you're a co-signer.
Right.
So the parent is responsible as well. And yeah, so for a degree at NKU to be $40,000 is insane. I mean, that's more than what private schools used to be.
Right.
So, Kentucky is one of only a few states, and I think it's like 3 or 4, that is funding education higher education at below 2008 levels. So most states are at kind of 2008 levels. Some are a bit above that. But there are 3, and I forget I want to say Oklahoma might be 1, and I forget the other one. But we're actually funding it less than 2008 levels. So if you were looking at a chart, the proportion that the state covers versus tuition, that crisscrossed around 2015. So, you always hear about people say, oh, their parents or their uncles or whatever said, well, I used to work a job in the summer, pay for school.
Then you could pay for school.
Well, yeah, because the amount of tuition that was coming out of your pocket was like maybe 15, 20%, where now it's like 65%. So it boggles my mind that we have a governor who's all about workforce development and jobs and investment in all these companies. Well, we need a skilled and educated workforce, and if you're putting college out of reach for so many people, for a lot of these middle-class families, they're not going to go, and so then we're not going to have people to fill these jobs, which we see that in Florence with some of the manufacturing companies. They're looking for skilled people to work in these manufacturing jobs, and they're just not there. And you're also not going to have a lot of entrepreneurs. You're not going to have a lot of those people who are going to start those small businesses, which are the kind of the backbone of our economy in Kentucky, because they can't afford college, and so they're going to drop out or not go, and they're going to get just kind of a meager hourly job, and they're not going to have the time or the resources or the capabilities to start their own company or start their own business. So it's a huge issue, and I talk to people every day who either like me, who have student loan debt, or who have kids who are in college or starting college. And I talked to a woman the other day. She has 3 kids in college. One's at a private school, but I think one was at Eastern and one, I want to say, at UK. And she was working 3 jobs because she didn't want to have her kids have student loan debt.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy. So, we have to fund higher education, and that's vital for our workforce development and vital for our economy. In Northern Kentucky especially, and I think this is where Frankfort one of the many ways in which Frankfort kind of ignores us up here is that, we are in a unique spot geographically where we have another state, well, 2 states really, but, we have another state right across the river that you can get in-state tuition. So people can go to UC, they can go to...
I go to UC.
They can, go to some of the schools and get in-state tuition. So, with this past budget, with the cuts to higher education, I know a lot of schools were cutting programs. NKU laid off 63 people. Eastern eliminated a bunch of programs. So if people are looking at, oh, well, I want to go to Eastern because they have this program. Well, now they cut it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe UC has a good program in that, right? So we have somebody going to another state, and they're more likely to stay there and maybe, and be involved and participate in that economy in another state and not in ours.
Right.
So again, I just don't see how we can say, we're for workforce development and we want to create jobs and we want to create business, but we're not, adequately funding higher education. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Okay, so Governor Bevin touts the decreasing unemployment rate as a success, and across the nation, unemployment is at an all-time low. However, job wages are stagnant, especially here in Kentucky. How would you address the issue of working class people not getting ahead in this current environment of pro-corporations, because that's basically what it is? And what about raising the minimum wage? It was talked about raising it to $10 an hour, and I don't know if that even passed, if that bill passed or not. But and that would be by 2020, so in a couple years, just trying to get it up to $10 an hour. Do you support that, and do you think that's enough?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely support increasing the minimum wage. Somebody who works 40 hours a week shouldn't be, living in poverty, and it's one of those things where, wages have not matched inflation. So, if you're spending $100 on groceries in 2018, you're getting a lot less groceries than you were, 10 years ago. And so it's getting harder and harder for people to get by because the price of everything goes up. But if you're not making more money, then you're actually losing money. So, I definitely think increasing the minimum wage is a positive. And I'm not, in terms of the dollar amount, I know some people will talk about 10, some people talk about 15, different things in between there. I'm not really sure. I mean, I've researched a little bit about that. Obviously, the concern, I think, is for, small business owners and things like that, which I totally get. I have many small business owners in my family, but at the same time, you should be able to pay somebody a fair wage. And having talked to, again, having a lot of small business owners in my family and talking to other small business owners, if you treat somebody well, if you pay them well and they have good benefits, they're going to work really hard.
Right.
Think about when I was in high school, when you're working a fast food job, there's a lot of turnover because you're like, well, I can quit this place and work at that place next door, and then I can quit that and work that one down the street, right? Where, I remember my first kind of, I want to call it a real job, non-retail, non-food service job. Not that those aren't real jobs. My first, kind of big kid job, I guess you would say, in college. I worked at Fidelity Investments. And, at the time, this was 2004, they paid us $9 an hour. We had, immediately had paid vacation. We could participate in the 401k, all that kind of stuff. And so, with that, it's kind of like a, Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility. I'm like, oh, well, they're paying me really well. I'm getting a good benefit. Like, I'm going to, work my butt off. I mean, I was, always a hard worker, but I think, you saw, and people, there was a lot of buzz about that. Like, everybody at NKU wanted to work at Fidelity.
Got it.
You had to be a junior, and so there's a lot, they pay good, they do this, do that. So they could hire, top talent because of what they offer. And so your productivity is going to go up. So, if you pay people a good wage and you offer them good benefits, you're going to get more out of them, and you're going to make your company more money that way.
Right.
One of the biggest burdens to any business is turnover, right? To hire new people, to train them, and then all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, if my grandpa owned a business for decades, and he always paid fair and had good benefits, and he said that's as a small business owner, he said, I want my people to work hard, and I want them to come to work and feel appreciated and put in hard work, and that that helps everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. How do we ensure that we have enough skilled workers in this area to support our growing economy? We talked about supporting higher education, but what about people who don't want to go to a 4-year and want to work in trade or things like that? And we don't have enough vocational schools.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a bill, and actually, I don't remember exactly what the governor originally said about, but I know there was a bill, and it was nonpartisan, to make community college in Kentucky free for first time, and it looked like that was going to pass, and then the governor changed it to certain certificate programs. And so again, here we take this thing that could be great, and then we water it down. And again, there's a concern that are we stuck here? Because I mentioned before with some of these manufacturers in Florence and Gateway, there was I remember reading this, and these jobs. I mean, you can work there 4 or 5 years and make $60,000 with a 2-year degree.
Right.
And they're having trouble finding people. Like, that's insane, right? They're having trouble finding skilled people to do that and to even enter the program. And I don't know all the ins and outs of why that's not been as successful as it should be. But I think it's just telling that we need to make 2-year colleges more accessible to people. We have, I think it's 8 or 9 across the state through KCTCS. And also, even in the kind of the high school level, I remember, when I was in high school, I had friends at Dixie who they would take classes half the day. My one friend would go over to Quinn Electric, and he would, learn how to do that. Or they'd go to we call it the V school. They go over to the V school and do nursing or, different types of trades and things like that. Because I'm seeing a shift now, because I feel like when I was in high school, there was this idea like, we either go to college or you're dumb.
Right.
Now what I'm seeing, with my kids' school is they always talk about college or career ready, which I think is a great term, right? To say, okay, college isn't for everybody.
Right, absolutely.
One of my best friends, he, we graduated together, we started college together, he dropped out for a few weeks, it wasn't for him, and, he went, and he's a carpenter, and he loves it.
Oh, yeah.
Another guy I went to high school with is an auto mechanic. He's been doing that for almost 20 years now, and he loves it.
Yeah.
So, being able to make these options available to high school students to say, look, you can, work in auto body, you can be a nurse, you can be a carpenter, you can be, a welder, whatever. Let's get you started here when you're, 16, 17, and then, you finish high school, you get an apprenticeship, you can go to tech school. It's 2 years, it's a lot cheaper. You're not going to be, saddled with all this debt, especially if we make it free.
Right.
And then that's going to help our workforce.
So do you feel like more high schools need a vocational school? My son goes to Campbell County, and they have a fabulous vocational school built right into the school where all of this is available. And even, maybe having adults being able to go there at night or whatever. I don't know if they do that, but, it just seems like we need more of these at more schools around the state, and maybe that's something that will
absolutely
help.
Yeah. And I know like at NKU we have a program where it works 2 different ways. Some professors teach college level courses at the school.
Yep.
So I teach public speaking. So maybe somebody goes to Dixie and they teach a speech class there. Or I've had every semester I usually have a couple high school students who they actually come to NKU and take classes. So I think kind of a similar thing. Whether it's a co-op program or something where you take your English and your necessary classes maybe in the morning, and then at lunch you go to technical school, and then you start earning those credits for Gateway or wherever you are in the state. Because then what it's going to do is it's going to show them the value of that. It's going to give them a skill, and then when they graduate at 18, they're already going to have
The first
a
step.
few of those classes out of the way. They can kind of figure out, say, do I like this or not? Because I know a lot of people are like that. I changed my major. I think most people do.
Yes.
And you think, I want to do this.
It
and
takes you a while to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, to expect a 16, 17, 18-year-old to say, okay, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Right.
That's a lot.
Right.
You have to kind of figure it out. So I think, that would be a good sort of litmus test for some of them to say, okay, yeah, I want to be a nurse, or I want to get into welding, or I want to work on cars. And they get into it, like, this isn't really for me. It's like, well, you didn't waste, thousands of dollars and all this time. You can kind of dip your toes in the water and see if that's for you.
Exactly. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about taxation and the current taxes that went into place in July. What are your thoughts on a fair tax system? Because right now we've got this flat tax where they basically dropped the taxes on the wealthy and raised it on poor people, and then they put in these other service-based taxes. What are your ideas for some different type of taxes?
Yeah, we definitely need a fair tax structure, right? Where, the top 5% of earners in Kentucky got a tax break, right? And we have revenue issues. So it's not let's tax the rich or whatever. It's like it's making it fair for everybody to where, before this, the way it worked with state and local taxes, the lower income folks paid on average, 8% of their annual income on state and local taxes. The middle class paid 9 or 10, and the upper class paid 5%. And so it's like, well, that's not fair. And I mean, especially in my district, most people are middle class, so you're paying, as a percentage twice as much as these top 5% are earners. So I think if we can make it more fair, it would lower taxes for 95% of people, for those lower income, middle income people, and then just make it a little bit more even and more fair for those top 5%, and that would generate, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year, right? If it's fair, again, it's fair, right? It's just making it fair, and these tax increases that went into place. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I've not heard one person who's happy about that or who's excited about that. I mean, nobody likes their taxes to go up, but again, how it was implemented, 6 hours on the last day. I was talking to somebody the other day. I was talking to somebody she's director of a nonprofit arts organization, because that's a big issue too, where this, what they're calling an unintended consequence, which I would call a huge mistake, that now charitable organizations have to pay it.
Right.
So I was at the Bus Sacrament Corn Roast on Friday. I was at the St. Pius Festival and at St. Joe's Festival recently, and on their silent auction, there's a little tag that says, due to new Kentucky law, you have to pay 6% sales tax on these. So if you win a gift basket for $100, you got to pay $106. And so, what I find ironic is that, people who are saying that we're for lowering taxes and we're for eliminating burdensome regulations and red tape for small businesses are raising taxes and creating more regulations and red tape for businesses and for nonprofits, for churches and charitable organizations. So it's like, well, what? It's just completely wrong. Like, you're being hypocritical. And so, those services, it shouldn't be taxed. Again, it does disproportionately affect, middle and lower income families. There is no actuarial analysis that was provided, so we have no idea how much it's going to generate in revenue. And it was done very haphazardly. The woman I was speaking with the other day, she said that they got a letter, fiscal year starts July 1, they got a letter, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks before that.
Now you have to start doing
now you got to start doing this. And they're like, well, we don't even have a system in place for that, right?
Right.
And then, you come and you buy a ticket to, one of our plays, and it's $20, and now it's, $21.20. People are like, what? I've been coming here for 50 years, So, the way that was handled was wrong. It's hurting most people. And, the scary thing is, and I think what a lot of people don't realize, is that, next year, the year after, depending on how things go in November, right now, the people in power, they want to tax groceries and they want to tax prescriptions. And, the governor has stated that. He supports that. And whether, some of his, buddies say that's not true, he's flat out said that. So, you go to Kroger, you spend $100, it costs $106.
Right.
You have a $50 prescription, it's going to cost $53. And so that's going to incredibly hurt, lower income folks. It's going to hurt seniors.
Right.
That they have to pay sales tax on that. And that's what's next. And that's concerning. That, again, we're placing the burden on our most vulnerable populations and the vast majority of our populations with our middle income families, when we're giving these tax breaks to the wealthy and these huge corporate welfare tax breaks.
Right. Okay, let's talk about this issue's kind of died down a little bit now, but it's now that school has started back up again. What are your thoughts on arming teachers in public schools and the current gun ownership laws? Do you think they need to be stricter?
I do not support arming teachers, and I've not met a single teacher or administrator who also supports that. So I know there are some groups who are kind of proposing, that we should arm teachers. I know, especially in Boone County, the board has struck that down, and it's, in my opinion, one of those things is like, well, the board and the superintendent and the administrators, they're in charge of their organization, so they should make that decision, and I think they've made the right decision. I believe there's a few school districts in Kentucky that might have passed, I'm not 100% sure or whatever, but, that's their decision to make. But, I don't support that. I've not met any teacher who wants that. The burden it would place on the teacher to make that decision, is just not. It's just not fair. It's not right. I know in both Boone and Kenton counties they provide a school resource officer for every school. I think that's a reasonable solution to say, okay, well, here we have somebody who's trained, to use a firearm, trained how to, recognize and subdue a threat, rather than, somebody who, teaches you how to play the recorder or something, right? Like that's their job. An officer's job is to do that.
So you would support maybe all schools having funds to have a resource officer, or what are some other ways that schools could be safer?
Well, what the research shows is that to prevent these tragedies, these school shootings, and all that kind of stuff, is to provide more mental health services. Because we hear time and time again with any of these mass shootings, whether it's at a school, whether it's in a mall or a concert or movie theater, wherever, we talk about the mental health issues. So, well, let's address those mental health issues and provide people with quality, accessible mental health care that they can afford. Having more mental health professionals in the schools. I know at Turkeyfoot, they have 2 school counselors, and whatever the sort of National Association of School Counselors recommends, 1 counselor per X amount of students. Like theirs is, I think it's like triple or quadruple, right? So how can these 2 people effectively, address the mental health needs of, the school, which is, the largest middle school in Kenton County, if they're overworked and understaffed, right? So let's give them the resources to be able to identify children who might need that help. And again, research shows that that's what helps, not arming teachers, not putting metal detectors, things like that.
Okay. Let's move on to healthcare and Medicaid. It seems like Governor Bevin has declared war on Medicaid recipients. What are your thoughts on the Kentucky Medicaid system and how we support it?
Yeah. It's kind of a mess right now. I mean, I know the comment deadline was yesterday about that waiver. And, Matt Bevin himself has said that, this isn't about saving money, and he wants to, one time he said he wants to give people dignity. Right. I'm like, well, last time I checked, you're not our father, right? That's not your job, is to, teach us dignity and things like that. And it's just, kind of mind-boggling that you want to put all these hurdles in place for people who are lower income, who are, seniors, who might have, some sort of disability, to say, okay, we're going to put all these levels of, this red tape and all this paperwork. To me, it's inhumane, and, we went from a model state for healthcare to like the exact opposite in a couple years. And, if you're not healthy, if you're not able to go and get the treatment you need, how can you work? How can you go to school? How can you be a good parent? How can you participate in society? If you're sick, if you're, worried about paying that bill. I mean, so many people, there's so many statistics about people who put off treatment, and even the cancer, even chemotherapy, because they're concerned about their bill. And that it's scary that's a thing, that people are literally dying, or they're not, living as healthy and as productive of a life as they could be, because they're concerned about that bill they might get in the mail. So, we need to strengthen our healthcare system, our Medicaid system, and not put all these hurdles in place, which again has literally shown, and the governor has stated that it's not going to save us any money.
Right.
So why are you doing it? Right. You want to kick people off the rosters, and it's like when, as an example, when he wanted to eliminate dental and vision from Medicaid.
He did eliminate it.
Yeah, like for a little bit. Yeah. And came back. I think it was in Maryland where they did that, and they saw ER visits skyrocket, right? And so it's like, well, yeah, so now, if you had a toothache or something wrong, you go to your dentist. Well, if you don't have dental insurance, you're going to go to the ER and rack up debt there. And if you're lower income, they're going to write that off. Right. So we can either pay, this much now or a lot more later. And so, that to me, with the healthcare, with the education, with all these things, if you're fiscally conservative, or if you're wanting to save money or whatever, it's just proven we need to do this, and this, right? Investing in healthcare, investing in education, investing in infrastructure pays huge dividends. Right. And so what I just find again crazy is that some of these people who are supporting this legislation that's hurting our state and hurting our communities, if they went to a financial advisor and said, okay, well, if you invest in this fund, you have a potential to make, these huge returns. Well, that's education, that's healthcare,
Right.
But when it comes to that, they're like, no, we don't want to do that.
Right.
And it makes zero sense.
Right.
It
I totally
just,
agree.
I think, I don't know why they do that. I have some ideas. I don't know. But it's just wrong.
What would be your number one priority if you were elected? What's your passionate?
I mean, definitely education. Absolutely. I mean, we kind of talked at length about that, but I mean, from pre-K to higher ed, again, they cut pre-K budgets. I know at my kid's school, the Family Resource Center has $0, right? And they're the ones who are providing backpacks and shoes and clothes and things like that to kids who have none of that, right? And we have to, I serve on the PTA there. We have to have dances, we have to sell candy bars, and all this kind of stuff to raise money for them. And it just seems backwards, right? They should have enough funding to provide these kids with the resources they need. Because how can you focus on school if you're hungry, or if you don't have a bed to sleep in, or if you don't have shoes, right?
Right.
And it just seems inhumane, to not want to help those, especially, I mean, it's children, we're talking about children. And people, with the education and with, the heroin crisis and all these other things, they talk about, oh, parents. And it's like, okay, you want to blame the parents, whatever. So, but that's not the kid's fault, right? So if the parents are addicted to drugs, or the parents aren't, sitting down and reading to them or helping them with their math homework, that's not the kid's fault. They didn't choose to be born in that situation. We should help them so that they don't continue that cycle of then becoming, negligent parents or addicted to drugs or whatever.
Right.
And so to me, that is, again, to not want to help children who are in need or who are suffering is just, it's just inhumane. It's wrong. So yeah, supporting K through 12 education, higher ed, and I think one thing that gets a little lost in the whole pension issue is that it's not just teachers, it's state employees too.
Right,
It's police, it's firefighters, it's social workers, and so in addition to a lot of our teachers maybe going to Ohio or going to the private sector, I've talked to police chiefs, I've talked to fire chiefs, and they're concerned with the same thing.
Right.
I had a police chief, in my district tell me, directly, face to face, that he's concerned about recruiting and retention, because state employees are underpaid, but they're promised that good benefit, that good retirement. Well, if you take that away, then who's going to want to do it? And so this pension bill, and I don't exaggerate, I mean, this pension bill and our state budget issues are going to dramatically impact our communities in a negative fashion. I mean, for a generation. I mean, they're going to make our communities less educated. They're making communities less safe.
Right.
If your house is on fire, do you want a bunch of people who just started, or do you want some seasoned veterans? Right. Same with our police officers. Do you want somebody who's been there 20 years, or somebody who's been there a few months? They're again, this isn't me saying this. This is, teachers, superintendents, police chiefs, fire chiefs, and all the cities in my district that are concerned about this. So, again, it's a nonpartisan issue, right? And so, this pension bill, again, it's not just about teachers getting the retirement. It's about maintaining the integrity of our communities.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So that's all the questions that we have.
Okay.
So if you want to take a couple minutes here and talk to our audience, and just ask, tell them why they should vote for you coming up on November 6th.
Okay, great. Yeah, I definitely, would appreciate your vote, but, I always encourage people to do the research and see, what's out there, and look at, voting records of incumbents, and then, kind of checking me out as a first-time candidate. I was born and raised here. I love Northern Kentucky. I moved away for a couple years for graduate school and for work. And I made a very conscious decision to come back to Northern Kentucky because this is where I wanted to raise my family. There's this joke that everybody always comes back to Northern Kentucky, but it's because it's such a great community. And, we have good schools, we have safe neighborhoods, we have, high property values and low taxes. But we're starting to see where all that stuff is going to shift. And, I don't want to mislead anybody act like it's going to happen next year, the year after, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when a lot of us are getting older, people like me, our children are becoming adults, and maybe they're starting having children, is that Northern Kentucky is not going to be the place that we've known it to be, and it's not going to be the same place that we've just loved and come to just appreciate so much. So I support Northern Kentucky. I support our communities. I support our schools, our first responders, and above and beyond that, I believe in honesty and integrity and transparency in government, and we've not seen that at the state level at all with this pension bill and this tax reform bill. We see people who are doing things last minute, they're rushing things through, they're doing things that are deemed illegal, and not responding to emails, not responding to phone calls, hiding behind closed doors, not meeting with their constituents, even people in their own party, I've heard, that are very upset by the leadership in Frankfurt. And so it's just, that's not how the government should operate. The definition of democracy is that the people govern. And so, the Capitol building in Frankfurt, that's the people's house, right? We choose our leaders. We get to vote for our leaders. We also get to decide what's important and what to do about those issues. And instead, there are people who want to run government like a business, which is run top down, or government is run bottom up. It's run by the people. So we need somebody like me in office who is going to be open, be honest, be transparent. I will meet and discuss issues with anybody, whether I agree with you or not. I'm not going to just meet with people who agree with me. I will represent you well. I'll represent you with integrity, and make sure that everything I do it for the people of Kentucky, the people of Northern Kentucky, and the people in House District 63.
Thanks, Josh. And if you have further questions, if you watch this recorded and you want to ask Josh some more questions, you can put them on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and we will get them to Josh, and he will answer them for you. So thanks again, Josh.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight.